you know, works for him. Works for him. Okay. So it's very hard for some clergy to say that they're atheists. And it's sort of obvious why that might be. As I say, the terrible connotations of the term, the cognitive dissonance, and I think one of the main ones is one which is often called the Concord fallacy, or the fallacy of sunk costs. It's called the Concord fallacy because when the French and the British were building the Concorde, there were terrible cost overruns, and they'd spent billions and billions on the thing that still wasn't going. And a lot of politicians were arguing, oh, well, we can't drop it now. We have so much invested in this, we've got to keep going. Now, any economist will tell you that that is simply fallacious thinking. This is not sane thinking. To treat sunk costs as an investment is just a mistake. It's called the Concord fallacy, or the fallacy of sunk costs. But a variation on it may not be quite such a mistake, and it certainly is an issue for a lot of them. They have invested so much for so long in this career of theirs that to switch courses now is unbelievably painful and difficult for them, for all sorts of reasons. One pastor that I talked with, and I did talk with him, had been a sub-pastor and assistant for Rick Warren out in Orange County, the man who wrote Purpose-Driven Life. And so one of these big mega churches. And he said, I got out in the nick of time. How did he do it, and why did he do it? Because he had two little children and they weren't in school yet. And he said, as soon as they get in school, it's going to be really hard for me because their classmates are going to say, oh, you're the children of that atheist who left the church. And I thought it would be so hard on his kids that the time to get out was now, before he had to add to his worries the suffering and pain and humiliation of his children in school, which he anticipated. Richard Dawkins was, Richard Dawkins, an old friend of mine, and one of the four horsemen of the New Atheism, was there, and he talked about something else, but I talked about his piece in the New Statesman, February 29th. The British government had a census which suggested that 70% of British people were Christians. And he thought that figure was high. So his foundation commissioned a study by the Ipsos Mori group, completely independent. This is high quality demographic research, to look at it again. And they just finished their report. And they discovered that maybe in 2001, 70% were Christians, but then there'd been a tremendous shortfall in the meantime because just 10 years later, it was 54%, plus or minus 2. So we're down to about 54% of people in the United Kingdom now claim to be Christians. But now let's look at this. Of the 54% that claim to be Christians, half of them hadn't attended a church service at all in the previous year. 16% hadn't attended in the past 10 years. 12% had never done so. So that really gives you a rather different picture of how popular and widespread Christianity is in Great Britain. And this one, most interesting of all, only 44% of census Christians believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Well, I picked up on that phrase. I thought, well, that's really interesting. I want to think of a little adjustment. Only 44% of census Christians say they believe that Jesus is the Son of God. And most of them, I submit, when they say this, have in mind something metaphorical, something symbolic. They don't believe literally, that Jesus Christ is the Son, the male offspring of God. But we don't know. It's interesting that the other 56% don't even bother with the metaphorical, symbolic reading. They just say, no, I don't believe that. But we don't know what percent have a metaphorical reading only. So in my talk in Melbourne, I said, no, so do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God? I didn't ask for hands. I said, if not, you might be an atheist. I'm not using all the slides I used there. I introduced this topic by drawing attention to Jeff Foxworthy's "You Might Be a Redneck" jokes. Told a few. You might be a redneck if you've been married 3 times and you still have the same in-laws. Or the state trooper stops you and says, do you have an ID? And you say, about what? Okay. Do you believe that God literally listens to prayers and intervenes in people's lives? If not, you might be an atheist. Do you believe that God is on our side in war or in football games? If not, you might be an atheist. And so it went a little bit. Do you believe that God created all creatures great and small? If not, you might be an atheist. Then I said, well, you don't believe that nonsense, you say, but you do believe in something divine. Something, a benign force. Oh. May the force be with you. If that's what you believe, you might be an atheist. I believe that Star Wars is a fantasy, and I think most people do. I can't resist, I couldn't resist then, telling a little story. I've done quite a lot of radio interviews. Not a lot, every now and then. And including some with right-wing Christian talk shows. And on one of them, the interviewer said, wait a minute, are you telling me that you don't believe in a transcendent force that all life and everything you do depends on? I said, oh no, I do. He says, you do? And it transcends the whole universe? And I said, yes, I do. I call it gravity. That doesn't make me a Christian. It doesn't make me a theist. It makes me an atheist. Another line that people often come up with is, what God is a concept. It's in people's minds, a concept that enriches their spirits and inspires them. If you believe this, then you're definitely an atheist. Definitely. Because God is not a concept. The concept of God is a concept. I believe in the concept of God. I believe it exists. I am not a theist. I am an atheist. Oh, I'm going to tell you about a deepity. But some years ago, I'm going to take questions in just a minute, but some years ago, my friend, dear friend now departed, Joe Weizenbaum, he was a computer scientist at MIT, but he really wanted to be a philosopher. He yearned to be profound. And he told me one day about how at the dinner table with his family, he had had some deep thoughts and had uttered them and his young daughter said, "Wow, Dad said a deepity."
Oh.
Creating this wonderful word. So I just love that word, a deepity. But now I have adopted it. I have accepted it. So now I'm going to tell you what a deepity is. A deepity is an apparently profound observation that is ambiguous. On one reading, it's obviously false, but boy, oh boy, if it were true, it would be important. And on the other reading, it's trivially true. Now, I'm going to give you an example of a deepity. You ready? Everybody's sitting down? Because, you know, it's heavy stuff. Love is just a word. Oh, wow. Oh, cosmic. No, think. Whatever love is, it isn't a word. It may be an interpersonal relationship, a deep emotion, the most wonderful state a mind can be in, but it isn't a word. You can't find love in the dictionary. It's not a word. Put quotes around it. Quote, love, quote, it's just a word. It's true. But it's trivial. Cheeseburger is just a word. Word is just a word. So there we have a sentence which uptight philosopher would say, well, it's not really well formed. If you put the quotation marks in, then it's trivially true. If you don't have the quotation marks, then it's just obviously false. Well, you might think, well, this is unfair because you can sort of guess what the person means who says this. Yeah, but they didn't say it. Probably what they mean is something like, love is a word that misleads us into thinking it refers to something real that everybody knows, and in fact it's sort of like unicorn, you know. There really aren't any unicorns and there isn't any love. Maybe that's what the person's saying. But that's not particularly plausible, actually. Or maybe the person meant that love is, the concept is so vague that it's hard to know when something is love and when it isn't, and that's probably true. But at any rate, you sort of get the idea of a deepity. Okay. So I believe the concept of God exists, and I'm an atheist. In fact, I believe that thousands of concepts of God exist, but that doesn't make me a polytheist, does it? So, okay. I think that's enough, actually. I'll just add one more thing. I even agree that the concept of God helps some people lead better lives. I just think there's better ways of doing it because of the problems associated with it. Okay, that's my talk about the research we're doing. It's still ongoing, and if you want to see my